Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. I got another Master Duel video for you. Today I wanted to talk about the upcoming Duelist Cup, and more specifically, I wanted to talk about some of the decks that I think are going to be really good in the Duelist Cup format. So if you are looking to compete in that, definitely want to make sure you're checking out lists like these as potential uses to get you in those top slots to qualify for the World Championships. Now, before we get into it, I want to quick real first up at the top thank both our YouTube members and Patreon subscribers, without whom support I could not be doing this channel at the frequency I do, uploading videos every day. For those who don't know, if you join here as a member on YouTube, that's going to be the button next to subscribe down below. You can see every upload early, including helpful tips like the ones in this video. So if you want to see all the guides, gameplay videos, all of my daily uploads before they actually go live, sometimes up to a week in advance, then definitely go ahead and hit that join button down below. If you want to see some more videos that aren't here on YouTube, over on patreon.com/hexlex, I actually upload videos multiple times a week over there, at least 3 times a week, and none of that content is posted over here to YouTube. It's extra replays that I don't have time to get to here. We're looking at OCG cards as they're revealed. We're talking about upcoming meta games over there. So if you're interested in supporting that way, patreon.com/hexlex. Either way, or whether you decide to watch here, I super appreciate your support. Anyway, now that we've gone through all that, like I said, we're going to talk about 5 of the decks that I think are going to be specifically best for the Duelist Cup. So let's go ahead and get right on into it. Alright, starting off at number 5, we've got Lunalight, which is, I think, always going to be a pretty solid contender in a best-of-1 format, due to the fact that Lunalight Liger Dancer is often extremely difficult for an average opponent to be able to out once it hits the field. And obviously in a best-of-1 format, if you stuck a towers and it's game ending, it's match ending. So Lunalight is still a very, very prevalent deck in this metagame, and I think that's going to be extra true on the Duelist Cup ranked ladder. In the Duelist Cup, a lot of the time, you don't necessarily need to win through your big flashy combo line. As long as you're in a scenario that your opponent knows they aren't able to out, a lot of times they'll concede, try to get to more games more quickly, instead of spending a lot of time on a matchup they know they're probably going to lose, right? So that's where Lunalight's Liger Dancer really shines here, because even if you don't full combo, as long as you stick the one Liger Dancer, a lot of your Duelist Cup opponents will probably concede to you at that point in the attempt to save time, if they don't play an inherent out to it, which a lot of Master Duel decks just don't. Now, when it comes to weaknesses here, I think that the big weakness of Lunalight is that it's a lot weaker to hand traps than a lot of other decks you're going to see on this top 5 list. Stuff like Droll and Lockbird is really, really impactful against Lunalight a lot of the time. You know, of course, the Fuelos and Max C. Lunalight doesn't have any really clean combo lines through a hand trap like that, although through Fuelos you could get away with summoning a Liger Dancer while giving them minimal draws. However, one other thing that Lunalight really has going for it is its ability to play a lot of board breaker type cards, which are really, really good in this metagame. Like Forbidden Droplet in particular. Even the Heavy Polymerization is a really good going second spell for its ability to turbo out the Liger Dancer really easily, which Liger Dancer then has a board wipe effect in and of itself. On top of that, Lunalight gets to play the Dominus Impulse, which is always a huge advantage in this format, because remember, with K9 Izuna running around everywhere, you ideally want your disruption to either be board breakers or hand traps that are actually trap cards. Either way, you want spell and trap cards more of the time. So Dominus Impulse not only having a really strong hand trap effect, but also not being a monster card, gives Lunalight that much more of an edge in this meta. All in all, I do think Lunalight is an excellent pick for the Duelist Cup, but I'm putting it at number 5 in this list because I think a lot of the other decks we're going to take a look at have more of an ability to push through hand traps and can also set up more of an explosive board. Again, the Liger Dancer is really, really solid, but if you only make one Liger Dancer and it gets outed, you have like nothing else to do at that point, right? So while that can often be a strength, the one Liger Dancer for Lunalight, sometimes it can prove to be a bit of a weakness as well. But all in all, still an excellent choice if you want to use this deck to grind up ranks in the Duelist Cup. Okay, next up in number 4 is going to be Mitsurugi. So while I think Mitsurugi variants are going to see a lot of different ones in the Duelist Cup, my prediction for the one that's going to do the best is actually one that's kind of up and coming. You may have heard of this already. It's Mitsurugi FTK. That's right, you can FTK your opponent off of a single Habakiri and nothing else. The way that you do that is basically, when you have 2 level 4s and 2 level 8s through your Mitsurugi combo, you can make the rank 4 Raiders Knight, which can then turn into the rank 3 Raid Raptor Fiend Eagle, and then you can use your level 8s to make the Gimmick Puppet Fantastics Machinex. That'll let you add the Argent Chaos Force, which will not only allow you to make the C-Xyz Gimmick Puppet, but also the number C15 Gimmick Puppet. The idea here is basically you're using your C-Xyz Gimmick Puppet Fantastics Machinex in order to summon number C107 Galaxy Eyes Tachyon Dragon to your opponent's field. It's got 4,500 attack points. Then you can use your rank 3 Raid Raptor to deal 4,500 damage to your opponent, followed up by your rank 9 Gimmick Puppet Giant Hunter, which will also inflict 4,500 damage to your opponent for a total of 9k. And again, this combo line is possible off of Habakiri and nothing else. And also, if you look at the deck list here, it's not just that we're running like a gimmicky FTK, this is also just straight up pure Mitsurugi, right? The only FTK related card that's actually in the main deck is a single copy of Rank Up Magic Argent Chaos Force. Everything else lives in the extra deck, and Mitsurugi, the pure version, already does not go into the extra deck that much. Even if you do, you see we still have all the regular tools you would want to see here, like King of the Ferrolimps, IP, SP, Dynamundo, all that stuff you would normally go into. So I think this Mitsurugi FTK build is going to really have the edge in the Duelist Cup, right? Now, Duelist Cup isn't just about winning games. Ideally, you're going to be ending your games very quickly. Not always going to be the case, but ideally, because of course, the more games you end more quickly, the more you're able to play, the more you're able to rank up, and the higher your rank is going to be. And an FTK deck is the perfect opportunity to do that. Not only that, but because your FTK only requires 1 main deck slot, you can still play a ton of hand traps. Dominus Impulse is on the table here, like it was for Lunalight. Again, a very powerful hand trap in general, but especially in this format where it doesn't trigger Izuna. And you can still play a lot of really good going second tools, like in particular, of course, Mitsurugi has its own end archetype kaiju, the Wosu, which also gives you a good matchup into Lunalight in particular. So yeah, while I think you'll see a lot of different Mitsurugi decks, this one I think is probably going to do the best as far as the results in the Duelist Cup. I would be a little bit surprised if we didn't see at least one Mitsurugi FTK in the top 100 once we get the results here. Now, as far as weaknesses, I think the biggest weakness of this deck is the fact that it's going to be overall weaker in terms of what it's doing on its end board, right? Now, you might be thinking, how is an FTK weaker? Well, if the FTK gets hand trapped or falls apart, then what's going to end up happening is you're just going to be ending on a slightly weaker pure Mitsurugi board, which a pure Mitsurugi end board is already going to be weaker compared to the other decks we're going to see in the top 5 here. Now, the idea is that a lot of opponents, if they don't know the FTK is coming, will waste their hand traps on your actual Mitsurugi cards, and then you can just kind of like hold your Habakiri or whatever other starter you're going to use to then go into the FTK. But I think a lot of people who are going to be higher up in ranks in, the Duelist Cup are going to expect Mitsurugi, pure Mitsurugi, to be on the FTK, and they'll save their hand traps for that line. So if you are going to be using pure Mitsurugi FTK in like the upper ranks of Duelist Cup, it might not be a bad idea to have a second deck ready. Lots of Duelist Cup players will use 2 decks. That way they're not, giving their opponent free information by always being on one deck. When they get queued up, it's like, oh hey, I know this person's on Mitsu FTK. So yeah, I would probably recommend a second deck in addition to this one if you're going to use this one, but I think Mitsurugi FTK overall is going to be a pretty solid choice. Coming in at number 3, we've got Yummy. So the particular variant I wanted to talk about is actually Sulfa Cord Yummy, although I think that Pure and Mitsurugi Yummy have an equal chance of doing about as well as Sulfa Cord Yummy, but Sulfur-Cored Yummy has been seeing a lot of success, particularly in rating duels, right? That's that, special stage after Master 1. In a lot of ranking duels, especially higher up in the rating duels, we're seeing a lot more Sulfur-Cored Yummy in particular. And there's a number of advantages that the Sulfur-Cored Yummy build offers. For one, any Yummy deck that has additional engines that don't take your normal summon are always going to be good, because Yummy kind of lives and dies by its normal summon with a lot of hands. So not only can the Sulfur-Cored cards help with that, but also the Time Maiden is a level 1 fairy monster that can special summon itself if you control no monsters, and it's not an activated effect. It's kind of like Jester Confi, right? But the reason that we use Time Maiden and Sulfur-Cored Yummy in particular is that it is a fairy monster. And another big advantage of Sulfur-Cored Yummy is that it gets to run Herald of the Orange Light, an extremely powerful hand trap that not only negates but also destroys monster effects. We also get to play a Dominus card, Dominus Purge, because not only are all the Yummy monsters, falling within the Light, Wind, and Earth attributes, but that also applies to our Sulfur-Cords as well. The Sulfur-Cored engine not only gets you extra ways to go into Yummy plays, but it also lets you end on a negate as well, the Grand Sulfur-Cored Coolia, and of course it's a negate that you can also use not only during your opponent's turn, but also during your turn, so you can set up the Coolia, then do Yummy stuff in order to insulate your Yummy plays. Now, when it comes to the big three being K9, Dracotail, and Yummy, as much as I do love Yummy, I think it's probably, not by a lot at all, but it's probably gonna be the least represented of those three decks in the Duelist Cup. Because like I said, Yummy's weakness is that it does often live or die by its normal summon, and whether or not it has follow-up is going to be super hand dependent and also variant dependent, right? But also even within the variants, it's going to be very hand dependent. Whereas, K9 decks have a lot of inherent ways, or more, I guess, inherent ways to play through and around hand traps and disruption. Overall, like I said, I think if you're going to go for Yummy in the Duelist Cup, Pure Yummy is not bad, but if you're going to go for Pure Yummy, you're going to want to make sure that you have like Jester Confi and the Sky Striker engine. Just like, I would include multiple ways to start your combos that don't necessarily involve using your normal summon. Or if not start, at least, extend like Jester Confi does. I think another reason that you'll see Yummy a little bit less represented than some of the other decks like K9 or Dracotail is because Yummy is split across so many different variants that, like, on a pie chart you might see, K9 Vanquish Soul and Dracotail eating up sizable chunks. And then you see a bunch of smaller chunks that have like Pure Yummy, Mitsurugi Yummy, Sulfur-Cored, etc., etc. It's really easy to forget that, you have to kind of add those up to see the total value of what Yummy's doing in this meta. So yeah, like I said, for me personally, I think Sulfur-Cored's probably the best variant to play in the Duelist Cup, but I think Pure or Mitsurugi Yummy would not be that much worse at all. Alright, coming in at number 2, we've got Dracotail. Particularly, I'm going to talk about branded Dracotail that's featuring the Performapal 5 Rainbow Magician. Something that you probably have noticed is that when it comes to the Duelist Cup in particular, a lot of these deck lists are going to be including like tech cards that are looking to close out games by themselves. Again, the idea here being that if you can get your opponents to concede quickly a lot of the time, then you're able to rank up a lot faster. So even if you're using a slightly unoptimized tech or list, that's still going to be better in the long run if it ends more duels quickly. Here we have access to Performapal 5 Rainbow Magician, which you can send off the branded fusion and then set a card in order to place it in your Pendulum Zone. Of course, once it's in your Pendulum Zone, your opponent's monsters will not be able to attack or activate their effects until they set a card of their own, which some hands your opponent just will not be able to do that. Or if they do, they'll have to set a card that they would normally need to combo off, right? It's kind of the idea here. And I think that this version of Dracotail will be a little bit more popular for the 5 Rainbow Magician tech. This is already something that we've seen in rating duels and community tournaments a decent bit, and I think that trend will continue into the Duelist Cup. Of course, if you don't want to play the 5 Rainbow Magician, then I would probably suggest playing pure Dracotail over branded, because the idea of playing pure over branded is that in the branded version, you're playing more bricks. 5 Rainbow Magician also being kind of bricky, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, but because it is a card that, again, can close out duels by itself relatively quickly, it's worth going out of your way to include it for the Duelist Cup. I think Dracotail continues to be a really solid choice in this metagame. It might not have, you know, the quote-unquote best matchup against K9, of course, because your 5 mana is going to be triggering their Izuna all of the time. However, I think that a lot of the time that's still really hand-dependent, right? Like, both not only your hand, but also your opponent's hand, just how much that ends up really mattering in the grand scheme of things. Overall, Dracotail, definitely still a really, really good deck in this metagame, and I think one of the best you could pick for the Duelist Cup. And finally, my number 1 pick for decks of the upcoming Duelist Cup is actually going to be K9 Vanquish Soul. That might not be a surprise to some people, but the thing is, like, it's not just that I think this is the most powerful deck of the meta, which I think it is, but not by a lot. I think it really comes down to versatility. That is the biggest strength of K9 Vanquish Soul, is that you can play through so many different scenarios based on what's in your hand, that a lot of the time you have a lot of games where you play better going second than you do going first. And that kind of flexibility in the Duelist Cup, I think, is going to be really, really valuable, right? You know, decks like Yummy, which kind of live or die by their turn 1 combo line, or their first turn combo line, really are going to pale in that regard in comparison to something like K9 Vanquish Soul, which can pivot on a dime and change up whether you're being more aggressive and pushing for an OTK, or you're going to decide to switch up and be on the back foot and play a bit more of a control game. This deck can do either of those things very, very well. You also get to play powerful cards like Izuna and Shifter, and of course you can also stack on the Molcharmy cards on top of that. I would probably play the Molcharmy cards here over something like the Rescue Ace Engine or DD Crows, or something that's within the Earth, Fire, or Dark attributes for hand traps, because while the Molcharmy cards are water and wind and don't help your Vanquish Soul stuff, they're so powerful, for one, and 2, they'll draw you into those attributes, your Earth, Fire, and Dark monsters, even if they themselves aren't of those attributes. So I think to help bolster your going second game, the Molcharmy cards are going to be pretty important to play in a highly competitive environment like the Duelist Cup. Now, as always, K9 Vanquish Soul's biggest weakness is going to be the fact that it is really hand dependent what your plays are going to be, which in a lot of ways is also kind of its strength too, right? But there are a lot of K9 VS hands where you just kind of end up bricking, and that is the reason that why I almost hesitate to put this deck at number 1, because it might be a little bit too unreliable, or I guess rather not reliable enough for an event like the Duelist Cup. This is really where deck building is gonna shine, right? Like, deck building as a skill is not talked about nearly as often as it should be, even by myself, honestly. But I think the people who are able to build their K9 Vanquish Soul to optimize power while minimizing bricks are gonna be the ones who really shine through this event. Yeah, overall, I think it is probably just the best deck in this metagame. Not only are its boards really, really powerful, but again, a lot of the time it is just that sheer versatility this deck has to play through so many different scenarios in so many different ways, and how many options you have. Like, even if you do just go full wombo combo and set up your end board, through that end board, you have so many different routes you can take as far as how you're stopping what your opponent does, that it's really hard for your opponent to be able to anticipate, right? Because, like, They could be like, okay, I could start with this to bait the Ripper, but then this, you know, other card will just get negated by the Umbral Whore. Or like, okay, I could drop with all their monsters, but they can still go Force Release Pop and then Werewolf Hand Rip, right? You have so many layered interactions. So while you are kind of relying on opening the right cards to make good plays, with even a decent hand, you should be able to make multiple lines of plays, which I think is really going to be why K9 Vanquish Soul, in my opinion, is probably just the best deck you could take to the Duelist Cup. All right, there we have it. Those are the 5 top decks that I think you could pick for the upcoming Duelist Cup. So a lot of the trends that we've noticed among them is that we're playing these kind of like tricky tech cards or spins on our engine in order to close out games quickly. It's not always just about playing, quick games, as in you shouldn't surrender right away if you think you even might lose. But if you can get your opponents to do that, that's going to be ideal. So that's why we're seeing a lot of like FTK and Floodgate type stuff more often in the Duelist Cup than you would see on Ranked Ladder. Whatever it takes to get that dub, right? That is really going to matter for an event like the Duelist Cup. Hopefully you found the information in this video helpful. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I super appreciate that. And again, I gotta give a huge shout out to the YouTube members and Patreon subscribers. And in fact, we're gonna go ahead and move on to our outro end credits where we can thank those supporters specifically. Hey everybody, Hexlex here. Thank you so very much for watching all the way to the very end of the video, which by the way is one of the best ways to support the channel. Speaking of supporting the channel, take a look at the names on screen. These are folks who have been so generous as to either join as a YouTube member or subscribe over on patreon.com/Hexlex to support. There's also perks for doing so. If you would like to see YouTube videos early, as well as some exclusive videos that get uploaded to YouTube, but for one reason or another I decide not to publish, definitely go ahead and hit that join button to see content early as well as some exclusive content. If you're looking for more exclusive content, over on patreon.com, I upload exclusive videos that are not posted on YouTube just about every single day. Whether you choose to subscribe over on Patreon, join as a YouTube member, or simply continue to watch, your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so very much. But for now, this is Hexlex. I am signing out, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.